Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Bacon Bears, and this is my brain dump channel where I talk about whatever I want. The other day on my other channel, Perpetually at Home, we were talking about the Scott Peterson face-to-face documentary that is now up on Peacock because after 20 years, he has decided to come out and just start this whole mess all over again. I am going to try to speed run this. This is only the first episode, and I have 10 pages worth of notes. So it's something. Bear with me. If you guys like what you see here today, make sure that you like and subscribe, and let's get started. So the first episode is Where is Laci Peterson? And this kind of gives you a background on the case if you're not necessarily familiar, and just kind of why Scott Peterson wanted to do this documentary for the first time in 20 years. And when I tell you that this took the media by storm in 2002, this was a wild time. You could not go into a grocery store and buy deli meats or go turn on the radio or turn on the TV without seeing Scott or Laci Peterson's face. Now, to kind of recap this whole thing, if you want a deep dive on the Laci Peterson situation, it is a very tragic story. But in 2002, in Modesto, California, Laci Peterson, a 26-year-old, 8-month pregnant woman, goes missing on Christmas Eve morning. And it has all of the aspects that makes America go wild. It's a beautiful looking couple who seem to have the perfect marriage, and then there's just sex, lies, and deceit and, murder, and just America went nuts. Scott Peterson was an immediate person of interest, which is not uncommon. You always want to rule out with investigations the people that are closest to us, right? Like our spouses, our siblings, any family members that we're with, always the people that, are seen with us when we're last seen alive. They want to go to the place that you were last seen alive so that the investigation can, get started. But it was his behavior and all the circumstantial evidence that led a jury of his peers to find him guilty and eventually sentence him to death. And then his sentence was then overturned, and he went into having life without parole, and he's been in prison ever since. He has now decided to come out with a documentary for the first time in 20 years, which is what we will be covering today. It is called Face to Face with Scott Peterson. It is on Peacock, and it is a 3-part series. Today, we're only covering the first episode. And I have to tell you that I am going into this very biased. Okay. I think that Scott Peterson had everything to do with the missing and the murder of his wife and his unborn son, Connor. I went into this and I wanted to watch it because I'm curious. I'm always curious if my mind can be changed. And that's why I watched this. And, Peacock also gave Casey Anthony a voice, and she was not convicted of anything. She is out wild and free, but I have thoughts. Okay. The reason that we're here today is because the LA Innocence Project has decided to get involved, and they hopefully want to enter new evidence that wasn't put into the original case, and essentially getting him a new trial, opening all of these old wounds again to prove his innocence, because this was not something that he could have proved 20 years ago. I don't know. Now, everything that I'm going to say is notes that I took from the documentary. They are all my own opinions and allegedly, but one thing to remember is Scott has been convicted of killing Laci Peterson and their unborn son. So in this episode, they open with Laci's wedding and just going through these pictures. I will tell you that I was about 16 years old when this happened, and it put such an imprint on my brain. And I have to say that when you say Laci Peterson, the one thing that comes to my mind is a picture of her in her wedding dress and just this smile that she has. Just this stunning, vivacious, she just exudes life. There is such a brightness that radiates from her. And they're flipping through these wedding photos, and it just looks like the happiest snapshot in somebody's life. They look happy. She looks stunning. They look in love. And it looks like every wedding photo album that you would ever want to see. There's a woman flipping through the photos of the wedding, and you hear a voiceover that say, "I believe my brother-in-law has been wrongfully convicted of murder." And they don't tell you who that is at first, but spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, or if you're watching it here so that you don't have to watch it on Peacock, it is Scott's older brother's wife. I found it interesting that they left it like that, like almost, I don't know if Laci has a sister. I know she has a brother. But I found it interesting that they put my brother-in-law and then left it at that. I don't know. Which I have to tell you, I have a brother-in-law of my own, and I have a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law, and they are my siblings, very much so. I don't view them as in-laws. I view them as family, probably to, their dismay, because I treat them as I would my own siblings that I actually have. And yeah, I would absolutely go to bat for my brother-in-law. I love him dearly, and I view him as a little brother. But I have to say, with all the circumstantial evidence, and if he was acting the same way that Scott Peterson was acting, I'm not sure I would rally behind him for his whole life. The thing about people is, if they are capable of doing one thing and one thing only, I think that is surprising us. I think that people are capable of anything, and I think that as much as we don't want to believe that people can do something like this, they absolutely can. And how to wrap your mind around that, I don't know. If it was my brother, or if it was my son, like I don't know. I don't know. I've never been in a place where I've just never wanted to believe something so bad, The first time we see Scott Peterson, he's in Mule Creek Prison. He only gets video phone calls for up to 15 minutes, and he starts speaking to the documentarian, and her name is Shireen Anderson, and you hear him saying, "I regret not testifying." Like, that's the first thing that he says, because he thinks that if he were to have testified, that this whole case would have gone completely differently. And it's not uncommon when you watch true crime for a defense team to be like, "You're not getting on the stand." We've seen it time and time again. I do have to say, historically, in the cases where somebody has gotten up on the stand in defense of themselves, most notably probably Alex Murdaugh, it has not gone well. It has not gone well. The public already perceives you a certain way. They're scrutinizing everything that you do just sitting in the courtroom. Every smirk, every tick, every flick of the collar, they are going to judge and read. And then for you to get on the stand and open your mouth is probably not the best. Although I do have to say, if I was innocent, right, and I was up against the death penalty, I'd want to scream my story from the rooftops. I don't know if I could possibly sit in a courtroom and be like, "Yeah, I'm not testifying. I have a story to tell. This is the truth." I think I would fight for my will to live, period. End of story, period. So in January of 2024, the LA Innocence Project decides to team up with Scott Peterson, and they are bringing up a theory that she was killed by burglars that were across the street, directly across the street at the Medina family home. There was a brown van in the driveway. This all happened at about 10 a.m. in the morning on Christmas Eve, and they are seeking a new trial with new evidence, saying that they can prove that theory. Shireen Anderson says that she wanted to make a documentary, and she reached out to Scott Peterson. He did not call her back or reply, and she ended up getting a hold of one of his family members, which happened to be his sister-in-law, and that's how this whole thing got started. Watching him speak and smile, it made me feel a certain type of way. He has an aloofness to him. He has a nonchalantness to him. He has a very "Yeah, what's up? I just, I got a story to tell, and I got the truth if, anybody wants to hear it." There's nothing. If somebody had put me in prison for 20 years of something that I did not do, I would be rageful. I have to say, very rageful. There is no rage. There is no crying. There is nothing from him ever. And I think that's there's nothing here now, 20 years later. There was nothing there then when everything was going on. And there is just a very odd, guilty or not, Scott is an odd little man. Like, we can just put it there. He is an odd man. And all of this is very odd behavior, especially when you go back and you reflect on how he was described. I almost said prescribed. Described by her family. He was wonderful. He was charismatic. He was amazing. This was the man that you wanted your daughter to marry. And then she goes missing, and they had this wonderful marriage. And he's just like, yeah, sometimes people just like go missing. And when they found the bodies of them, he's just like, yeah, I never thought it was them. Never even crossed my mind. It's a bizarre behavior. Watching him speak really grossed me out. It made me very uncomfortable. It gave me the ick. However, I can see how generally Scott Peterson is your typically conventionally good-looking male. He is charismatic. He is personable. And I do understand how some people could possibly be convinced of his story. Not I, but I do see how some people could be convinced of his story. If you are, and if you think he's innocent, please leave it down in the comment box below. If you don't think he's innocent, also leave that in the comment box below. Let's start a discussion. No arguments, but let's start a discussion. He says that the reason that he wanted to do this documentary is because he wanted to take the hurt off of my family, quote unquote. I want to take the hurt off of my family, which I find so interesting and just a nasty statement. I think Laci and Connor are gone. A mother has lost her daughter and her grandson. Laci's family rallied behind Scott in the beginning. They loved Scott. Scott was their son, not their son-in-law. Like, they took him in and they loved him with their whole hearts. And 20 years later, he has the truth, right? And he wants to, basically exonerate himself. And I was never a part of this, and I'm innocent. But I want to take the hurt off my family, as if her family hasn't suffered. I just that sentence came off as odd behavior. I wish I had a little button that every time I spoke about Scott Peterson, it would say odd behavior. Anyways, on the morning of Christmas Eve in 2002, Laci Peterson goes missing. Laci Peterson, 8 months pregnant, disappears. Poof, gone into the air. The police go to work immediately as soon as they find this out. She was considered a high priority missing person because she's 8 months pregnant. Everyone is in a panic. Okay. Laci's family is doing interviews. People are on horseback, helicopters. People are walking through marshes. They got dogs. They got posters. They got just people everywhere. Frenzy. Where is Scott? Unbothered. Just not bothered. No TV interviews, no state of panic. Just, what do I do with my hands? Very odd behavior. The first person that you have to clear is always the closest to the victim, right? They're always going to talk to the spouse first. And typically when you have a husband-wife scenario, you always want to make sure that it's not the spouse, right? And you always want to go into the home. He was the last one to allegedly see her alive. So, you talk to him first. Of course. If my husband went missing, I would thoroughly expect the police to come and talk to me first. Scott immediately sort of goes into a defense mode. He immediately says they were looking at me and that was it and nobody else. But what I also find funny about that is there's no rage, right? Like, okay, so let's put myself in this scenario. Okay, this is hypothetical because I haven't been in the scenario. My husband goes missing, okay? And the police come in and they want to talk to me. I am going to give them every single piece of information of where I think my husband or my son could possibly be. I am going to give clothes. I am going to help and aid in any way. If I felt like the police were lingering too long and they were looking at me and I had nothing to do with this, I would be furious. Why are you wasting your time? Go find my loved ones. Wouldn't you think that Scott would have a little fire under him and be like, I have nothing to do with this. Go do your jobs. But instead, he, which, I mean, everybody deals with, grief differently. And he retreats back into himself and he's just like, yeah, they were looking at me. That's all they focused on. But there was no fight. There was no fight anyway. There was no fight to look for Laci. There was no fight to get the cops off his back. There was just odd behavior. As the investigators are looking into Scott, they find that him and Laci seem to have the perfect marriage. They're happy. Her whole family absolutely loves him. One of the parents saying that this is the man that you want your daughter to marry. He has the most amazing relationship with their family. And they were just a beautiful couple that were about to expect a baby boy. There's a scene where they take him into a police interrogation room and he's being interviewed. And he just seems calm, cool, and collective. He's collective. Like, yeah, we got up and she ate a couple bowls of cereal and watched some Martha Stewart. And, it was just, I've never taken drugs, okay? I've had to take drug tests to get jobs and I sweat because it makes me nervous because I always think I'm going to get like popped for a poppy seed muffin, okay? When the police lights go off and I'm not doing anything, I am nervous that they're going to pull me over for absolutely nothing. I don't know why I feel this way. High anxiety, I guess. But sitting in an interrogation room, that makes me nervous watching him sitting in an interrogation room. And he could not be just more, yeah, man. Sometimes people just go missing. I don't know. It's Christmas. Odd behavior. The other thing that the detective noted was that Scott ended up talking about Laci in the past tense, which if you are speaking to somebody about somebody who is actively alive, you would say they love doing this. They are, she is. And he was talking to the detective and say she would, she did, things like that. So that was one of the things that he had noted. So we start to get a little bit of a timeline, and at 10 a.m., Scott leaves the house because he had bought a boat on December 9th. Okay, now remember, Laci goes missing on Christmas Eve. So Scott buys a boat on December 9th, and he claims that he buys this boat for Connor's grandfather, Laci's dad or stepdad, I can't remember which one, but so that he could have a relationship with his grandson. Scott is an avid fisherman with his, family. He goes fishing, they go golfing, they do a lot of things with just the boys. He wanted to have that relationship between Laci's dad and his dad, I guess, and Connor, their unborn son, and that's why he ends up buying the boat. He also decides on Christmas Eve, he got up Christmas Eve morning, and he's like, I'm going to go golfing, but it's too cold outside, so instead I'm going to go fishing. Okay? Again, odd behavior. Why you're going to take your boat out for the first time on Christmas Eve while your wife is at home 8 months pregnant? I don't know. But I don't know. Maybe that's a discussion that they had. Anyways, he tells detectives that he made the decision that morning to go fishing because it was too cold to go golfing. So a couple of things that I want to note was he had purchased a fishing license for the 23rd and the 24th of December. So that was already in the works. He already knew that he was going to take the boat out one of those days. The other thing is I grew up fishing, okay, with my grandfather and my uncle. I have been fishing my whole life. And at least how I've been taught to do it is that one does not just go fishing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You get up and you have that boat out as the sun is coming up. And you can fish all day if you want, but the best times to fish are when the sun is coming up and when the sun is going down. One does not just fish at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the hottest part of the day or in the middle of winter. I've never been to California during the winter, so I don't know what it's like out there. But it's odd behavior. The other thing is they show a map of where their house is. He could have taken his boat out at any places close to his home, but instead he decides to drive 90 miles away from his house to the furthest place, to the Berkeley Marina, as a last-minute decision to take this boat out for the very first time. So he leaves at 10 a.m. to take his boat out. He arrives at the Berkeley Marina at 12:45, and he's only there for an hour and a half, and then he decides to pack it up and come home, and he's home by 4:30. There's absolutely no conversations about him fishing, which again, if you are just going to take the boat out, why did you have to drive 90 miles to do so? When he's done at the marina, he leaves a voicemail on Laci's phone, and the detective says that voicemail is ooey gooey. They seem like newlyweds, and that voicemail was left for the detective to hear it. Like he planted that. That didn't really mean anything to me. I've been with my husband for 12 years, and every single morning I wake up to a text message. Good morning, beautiful. I love you. You are my whole world. So if I go missing, just know that my husband did not plant that there. He does that. Or maybe that's part of his plan. He's done it for 12 years, so I can't go missing, and, whatever. But that didn't strike me as odd. What did strike me as odd was that Scott had said, if they think that that's too much for the loving, messages that I left for my wife, then they must have really sad marriages, which is a very interesting statement coming from a man who was having a 2-month affair. But don't worry, we'll get there. After being at the marina for an hour and a half and coming home, he gets home about 4:30 and Laci is nowhere to be found. And he said that he was very worried at this point. So in his panic state, odd behavior, he decides to clean up mop buckets, wash his clothes, take a shower, grab something to eat. I believe they said pizza and milk. And then at 5:17 p.m., he calls Laci's mom. Now, let me give you a little story. My daughter had to be rushed to the emergency room last year. Okay, and I was on the way. I was packing a lunch to take my son to the zoo with his school, and I had on a tank top and a very uncomfortable sports bra and a pair of shorts, and my daughter needed to be rushed to the emergency room. So I took her and I left. And I am in the emergency room, and we ended up being admitted, and I had to sleep overnight, and I was in these clothes for 3 days. I'm freezing because hospitals are cold. This sports bra is just digging into my side. I didn't bring a toothbrush. I didn't bring a bra, nothing. And then one of my friends had said, can I bring you anything? And I was like, please just bring me some clothes and a toothbrush and some deodorant. And they said, okay. And I was telling my husband, I said, had I known, I was like, I wish I would have brought clothes in hindsight. I said, but I didn't even think about it. And I went to the hospital. And my husband looked at me and he said, I got to be honest with you. I think I'd be a little disappointed if you would have decided to change your clothes and pack a bag for yourself when our daughter needed to be rushed to the emergency room. And I was like, that's a great point. You're in this state of panic and you're just like, oh my God, I got to go do any of these other things. Like none of what he does makes sense. You're in a panic that your wife is gone, but you're cleaning up, you're doing laundry, you're relaxing and eating pizza and taking a shower. Why wasn't Laci's mom your first phone call? Also, one of the things, this is kind of getting back to the interrogation footage, one of the things that he has mentioned, which I also found very odd, is that if there would be grief counselors for Laci's family. For what? It's Christmas Eve. We don't, maybe she's at the grocery store. Maybe she's out with her friends. We don't know. Why are you asking for? Also, if my family member is missing, I do not need a grief counselor. I need dogs. I need a group of people. I need flashlights. I need helicopters. I need drones. Get those grief counselors some gym shoes because we're going to find somebody. Like, it's odd behavior. It's odd. It's all odd behavior. Now, while Scott is gone at the marina at 10:18 a.m., which they claim is this magic number, that Laci Peterson had to be deceased before 10 a.m., okay? So they're like, they hang on to this magic number that's 10:18, and, now, while Scott is gone at the marina, Karen Service, their neighbor, finds their dog, Mackenzie, puts her back in the yard, and she still has her leash attached. This is somewhere between 10:18 a.m. and 10:34. That's when this all kind of starts, right? In the theory. So the police have this theory that she had passed away before 10 a.m. and then he had moved her body. I agree. Let's get into it. There is no crime scene inside of the house. There is no sign of a struggle. There is no blood. There is nothing. Which leads me, this is my theory. This is what I think, okay? And for a couple of reasons. Number one, I have been 8 months pregnant twice. Things that don't come to mind when I was 8 months pregnant. Agility, okay? I would sit in a chair and you could audibly hear me breathing. It would take me 30 minutes to get into said chair and 30 minutes to get out. And I was barely holding my bladder together, okay? So not only that, Scott is a very tall man, athletic, strong. Laci comes up to maybe his shoulder in the pictures that I've seen. She is a very small, petite woman that is 8 months pregnant. You can do nothing but exist at 8 months pregnant. I mean, some people are very active. Not me. Not I. I was not. I was a slug at 8 months pregnant. So I believe that there was no crime scene or sign of a struggle because I believe that maybe Laci had died of some sort of asphyxiation, whether it be strangulation or suffocation. I also have a dog that is sweet as pie. She's back here she's right there. You can see her butt. She is the kindest dog in the world. Nobody is getting in this house. A stranger, even people that are not strangers, are not getting in this house quietly. I can tell you if I'm outside, she does not let anybody get near me or my children. And she is so kind and so sweet. So they have a dog. The other thing is I think that there was no sign of a struggle because there's the element of surprise. You are in a home, 8 months pregnant, with the baby of the love of your life, and the love of your life attacks you, and they've never shown any sort of sign of aggression, and you are just beyond shocked. I think that physically, Scott would be 100% capable of very easily overtaking Laci. End of story, period. And on top of her being 8 months pregnant, it just made it that much easier. I think if she wasn't 8 months pregnant, he could do it with ease. But that's my opinion. Christmas morning, December 25th, the press release goes out that she's missing, and this is a national media frenzy. Frenzy. Everywhere. Unbelievable, which is interesting to me because it was everywhere before we had social media, okay? And now they want to come out and they want him to get a new trial, and you're supposed to be judged by a jury of your peers. How are you going to find a jury of his peers at this point that don't know about Scott Peterson? I'm not sure I could bring up Scott Peterson and somebody wouldn't know who he is. I don't know how you get a fair trial at this point. Laci's family is 1,000% on Scott's side. The public immediately turns against Scott. Immediately. It's the husband. And Laci's family were like, yeah, he would never. He would never do something like this. He's amazing. They love each other. He's our son. Absolutely not. They go on the defense for Scott. They absolutely love Scott. It's interesting that Scott gets on camera now and says he regrets not getting on the stand to defend himself. He also says that at the time he was unwilling to go in front of the camera and give them any sort of ugly emotions that he was feeling at the time. Wouldn't you do anything? Wouldn't you do anything? I don't care if I haven't showered in 3 weeks, have boogers hanging from my nose, red eyes, slobbering. I would get on camera and I would anything. I would let the police come into my house. I would anything to find my loved ones. But you didn't want to give them the ugly emotions that you were feeling. So instead you gave them no emotions. You just gave them nothing. Laci's mother got up on the stand, and Laci's stepdad gets up on, the podium, and they're crying and sniffling and talking about their daughter. That is a normal reaction. Scott, odd behavior. And also, I find it interesting, you didn't want to give them emotions, but you also didn't give them anything in the aid of, what are you chewing? It's a sock, by the way. So you didn't want to give them any emotions, but you didn't want to give them anything to aid your missing wife and child either. The police end up wanting to go into the house, and they come up to him with a piece of paper and they say, hey, Scott, can you let us in the house? You just have to sign here. This will, give us permission to go into the house, the shop, the boat, anywhere that you have. And Scott flat out looks at them and says, you don't expect me to do this without a lawyer, do you? What? Come on in. Yes. Find anything and everything. Open the windows, open the doors, just anything. So they end up they end up setting him up, right? Like, so they say, we have this, you can sign this if you don't sign this, which he didn't, because they wanted to see what he would say. They ended up having a search warrant, and they go into the house anyways. And then he says, Al, to the detective, Scott says, Al, where's the trust, man? Which is interesting to me because it's literally a detective's job not to trust anybody. A detective's number one priority is the victim, and that is it. End of story, period. They are going to look at everyone. They're going to look at the husband. They're going to look at the mom. They're going to look at the stepdad. They're going to look at the brother. They're going to look at everybody because that's their job. That's their job. They also show his sister-in-law, and she's also shocked. Like, she comes off as a little peeved, I guess, that the police had a search warrant. She's like, yeah, and then they came back 2 days with a search warrant. Like, she was irritated by it. They're doing their job. They're looking for your sister-in-law. Of course they're going to have a search warrant for the last place she was seen alive. Time is not on your side when people are missing. It's insanity. What they did find inside of the house was that there was no forced entry. The windows were locked from the inside. The doors had no damage on them, so nobody kicked their way in. How a stranger could get into the house with that dog, I don't know. But Scott is also claiming that Laci was not attacked when she was in the house. So that, take it or leave it. I think she was in the house with Scott. Something had transpired, and he had moved her from one place to another. That's my theory. That's also their theory. So they went to the warehouse and the shop, and they found concrete anchors. They said that he had made 5, but they only found 1. So they're curious to where the other 4 went, which would make sense in their theory. 4 anchors, 4 body limbs, and he then puts Laci into the Berkeley Marina. Scott comes out and says he doesn't know where they got that theory from, that he made 5 anchors. He's like, I don't know where they got that theory. He discredits what everybody says, but then he never gives anything to follow up on why he discredits what they say. It's just like, yeah, they said that. I don't know where they got that. December 30th is one of the biggest breaks and the most pivotal moments in this case. Pivotal. And when you hear Laci Peterson and you hear Scott Peterson, there is another name that immediately comes to mind if you are familiar with this case, and that is Miss Amber Frey. Amber Frey is another victim in this case. There's just so many victims in this case, and she is another one. And what a woman. What a woman. The police, the public, Laci's family, Scott's family have zero indication that Amber Frey even exists on this planet. Nobody knows about this. But now the police do. And with Amber Frey and his oddball behavior, Scott's oddball behavior, not looking great. October 2002, 2 months before Laci goes missing, Scott is at some sort of convention for work, and he's walking around presenting himself as single, and he meets this girl, and he's wearing a name tag like, hello, my name is horny bastard. which I have thoughts. First of all, what are you, 17? Even if he was single, if a man walked up to me with a name badge that said horny bastard, I would be like, ew, yuck. But on top of that, we know that at this point, Scott is married and has a son on the way. He's talking to this girl. This girl says, I have a friend who lives in Fresno. Her name is Amber Fry. You guys should meet. And he says, yeah, that would be great. I would love that. The interviewer asks him, how did you feel when the police said that you didn't want to be a part of, you didn't want to be a husband and you didn't want to be a father? And he said, I find that completely offensive and disgusting. What? What? That's the other thing. Like, not only are you not telling anybody that you're married, but you're not telling anybody that you have a baby on the way, a son coming, which tells me that you are not happy about any of these things. You're not excited. You're not sharing this news with the world. People who are excited about their marriages and their babies tell everyone. Amber Fry and Scott Peterson meet in November, and they immediately start a romance. It's the best thing. Scott is the perfect man. He wants to spend the rest of his life with Amber Fry. She is a single mother at the time, I believe. And Scott, tells her allegedly, I don't want to have a baby. Your baby is enough for me. I want to be with you forever. This is going to be just me and you in the world. Amber Fry calls into the police hotline, and how does Scott think that Amber is just never going to find out about this? Does he think she doesn't own a TV? Your face is plastered. I can't go buy deli meats without seeing your face or your wife's face. I can't turn on a radio. I was 16 years old in high school. I've never watched the news in my life, and I knew who you were. They had the Today Show, Diane Sawyer, any news station looking for this missing woman in Modesto, California. I am on the other side of the planet, and I knew who Laci Peterson was. And Amber Fry, his age, who lives in California, you think she's just never going to find out? So she calls the police and she says, I'm Scott Peterson's girlfriend. The police are like, does he know that you're talking to us? And she says no. And he's like, good. I'm coming to your house. So they go to her house. They end up going to Radio Shack, throwback, put a little walkie-talkie in the comments if you remember Radio Shack, whoop, whoop. And they get a tape recorder and they decide that they're going to start tape recording the phone calls. And she's like, yeah, Scott calls me every day. And as they're setting it up, who calls? SP. And he calls, and it's gross. It's unsettling. I love you. You're the greatest. You're so special. You're so perfect. Like, none of this is happening. Like, his wife and child are not missing. Hey, how's your day? I love you so much. As he speaks about Amber Fry in the documentary, he reduces her to cheating and just sex, which, to me, yes, an affair is cheating, but to say cheating and to say affair are two different things. Okay, cheating, maybe drunk, one night stand, it was an accident, you regret it. Okay, I cheated, this was bad. You had an affair. You had a whole ass other relationship with another woman. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Talking about getting married, talking about moving in together, moving forward, living a life. It wasn't just like sex sometimes. And he diminishes it to sex. Like, the police don't have 29 hours of wiretap on your phone of you saying all these things to Amber Fry. He comes out and he says, she made it more than it is after Laci went missing. What? The police have 29 hours of wiretap. And I have to tell you, I listened to 29 seconds of this and I wanted to punch myself in the face. How they could listen to him spew his trash, knowing that his wife and child are missing. Amber, at this point, knows his wife and child are missing. And he's like, I'm going to Brussels. I'm going to Paris. I'm going to Alaska. I can't see you because I'm traveling. And all I do is think about you. And I have your picture in the pocket of my shirt and blah, 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 blah. It's just so, trash. It's all trash. And then they decide to tell Amber to turn up the heat. They're like, listen, we've had enough of this. All right. Tell him you know. So she comes out and she's like, hello? What is happening? And allegedly, Scott told Amber before Laci goes missing that he lost his wife and this would be the first Christmas without her. Okay? He tells her in a way that Amber thinks that Laci is already dead. Okay. First of all, he presented as single. And then when she brings up, he's like, I have something to tell you. I had a wife, but she's gone now. Okay. So then Amber says, listen, you told me that you lost your wife tragically. And he's like, I never said tragically. And she's like, you told me you lost your wife. And in true narcissistic fashion, if you've ever dated a narcissist or known one, this is gaslighting at its finest. There's many ways to lose a wife, Amber. There's many ways to lose someone. It's giving very much, I told you that and made you think that she was dead and it was tragic. And but you took it that way. I never said that. You made it seem to be that way. You did that. You, not I. What? I didn't. I may have said it all different ways to make you think that. But you're the one. You're putting words in my mouth. Which tells me that he thinks that he is the smartest guy in the room. Also, he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room doing this documentary. But, So now when she comes out, she tells her story and Amber is motive. We have motive. He doesn't want to be a father. He doesn't want to be a husband. He doesn't want this conventional life. He finds this woman that he wants to be with. And instead of getting a divorce and doing the things that he needs to do, perhaps alimony and child support, he decides to go this route. Now let's start to put a couple of dates together. He meets Amber Frey on November 20th. On December 9th, he buys a boat. He starts searching the tides in the San Francisco Bay, and he buys a fishing license for the 23rd and the 24th of December. And on 24th of December, his wife and son go missing. He claims in the documentary that he continues to speak to Amber after Laci goes missing because Amber would be the one that would ruin the search for Laci. Not the fact that he has not helped at all. Not the fact that he has not been cooperative at all. But Amber would ruin it. What? What really breaks my heart about when Amber Frey comes forward is the fact that I felt like this was a double blow to Laci's family. I feel like this family rallied behind Scott. There's no way that he could be a part of this. We love him as much as we love our daughter. And then all of a sudden this comes out and I, as her mother, oh my God, my heart breaks. I have a daughter. I could not imagine the pit in Laci's mother's stomach when Amber Frey came forward. Holy shit. The betrayal on all levels. It had to be devastating. Devastating. I added a note here that this documentary is doing him no favors. I don't mean to laugh like right behind that statement about her family, but this documentary is doing him no favors. His demeanor in this interview is odd. He's like laughing and smirking and like talking to a friend, just like nonchalant. Yeah, it's just odd behavior. Now, the sister-in-law reflects on the affair and she is shocked, disappointed. She is mad. She has no idea that it was happening. She starts getting emotional. She starts crying a little bit and she says she realizes after the affair comes out that nobody is going to be looking for Laci alive anymore. They're just going to be focusing on Scott. And that statement was extremely telling to me that you did not always think that Scott was innocent. Because if you did, it would have been like, yeah, my brother-in-law's a cheater. He sucks. But he didn't kill her. But instead, your immediate reaction is he's having an affair, and you're like, nobody's looking for Laci alive anymore. The search was still on. Everybody was still looking for her. But you knew that nobody was looking for her alive anymore. Laci's brother comes out at the time and says that these are not the actions of a man whose wife is missing. He also claims that he was not working or really cooperative with the family at this point. And you can see the disappointment and the devastation on their faces. It's insane. It's gut-wrenching. It's awful. At some point, Scott Peterson's family hires a personal investigator named Gary, and which is completely understandable, right? His wife is missing. They think that he didn't do it. They're like, we need a private investigator to try to help us to find Laci. Completely understandable. But he sort of acts like he made all these new discoveries. And the only thing he really brings up is the fact that a couple of people said they saw her on her route of walking that day. So we have Sue, I believe her last name was Maldonado, that says she saw a lady that looked like Laci at 10 a.m., which would blow the theory of 10:18 completely out of the water, right? They have Frank Aguilar that says he saw her between 10 and 11, Vivian Mitchell, who saw her through a window while washing her dishes, and these people don't know her. Remember that. And they mention a golden retriever, right? And then there was Diana Campos, who saw her at 10:45. So according to their theory, between 10 o'clock and 10:45, Laci is still alive. Now, these are people that have no interactions with her, and these are people who did not know her at the time. And I am just putting this out there, okay? But what we know historically from true crime cases is that eyewitnesses are not the most accurate. Memory is not the most accurate, and not to discredit any people, but there is this weird phenomenon that happens where sometimes people want to be a part of something high profile. Okay? Scott says that people complained that investigators did not take them seriously. He said that investigators turned away credible witnesses, and I would be interested to know what makes them credible. This was not at a time where we had Ring doorbells. This was not at a time where people were taking videos with their phones. It's an honest question, and I'm not trying to be biased, but you can't tell me that these are credible witnesses when all they saw was a woman who looks like Laci walking the number one most common dog in America. That's it. How can you tell me that that was Laci? You can't. I can't imagine being an investigator in something like this. So many people coming forward. They had psychics. I mean, how Amber Fry got through. I mean, I know she had, evidence and stuff saying that proof that she was with Scott, but I'm sure there were people that were like, yeah, I'm Scott's girlfriend or whatever. Just this like people that want to be a part of this, and thousands of tips, and them having to go on to, investigate these tips on top of doing the investigative work that they had to do inside of Modesto, California. Just has to be exhausting. At the end of the episode, you have the LA Innocence Project claiming that there was evidence left out of the trial that supports Scott's innocence. So they are filing a new discovery motion, and they are trying to get a new trial for him, which, if it does happen and nothing comes of this, I find it unfortunate that this family has to live this again. This mother, this father, this brother, this whole family, everybody that ever loves Laci has to live with this every single day. And now you want to dredge it up again because you claim, right, that there were things that were left out. Why were they not put in the trial? Why did you not fight for this to be put in the trial the first time? The last thing that's really said in this episode is a sister-in-law of Scott Peterson saying that Scott Peterson is innocent, and I'm not afraid of the truth. And I find that to be such an interesting statement because I don't believe that to be true. I think the truth in this case is the scariest thing of all. I think that there are situations where we have no idea, even though we have promised our mind, our spirit, our body, and our soul to somebody, we have had our most intimate moments with them. They are sitting across the table from us and we still have no idea who they are. I think that is the scariest truth. I think Scott has presented as the the most perfect human being and never gave anybody, including Laci, a glimmer or an insight to who he really was. And she was caught off guard in a moment where she was the easiest prey. I think that you can marry someone and still have no idea who they are. And I think that is the scariest thing. Unfortunately, when we think about monsters in our society, right? Like people who are capable of this kind of thing, we have a preconceived notion of like what they look like, right? They're not good looking. They're not charming. They're not affluent. Like there's just a lot of things that don't go when you get nervous by another person, right? So for Scott Peterson to present and be the way that he is outwardly does not scream monster. And I think that is the scariest truth that someone like him could be. Anyways, that is the recap of the first episode, and that's my opinion on it. My name is Bacon Bears. I am here once a week. I talk about whatever I want. If you guys want to see more vlogs and DIYs, you can go to Perpetually at Home, which is my other channel. If you like what you see here, like, subscribe, bang your face against the keyboard, and other than that, I will see you next time.